Hey guys, how's it going? Jay here. So this is the Joseph Crowe system number 1680 loudspeakers that I've been meaning to check out for some time now. And now that I finally got the chance to listen to them in my own space and do some measurements, I have to say that these are probably the best horn loudspeaker I have heard to date. So there are key differences between this loudspeaker and other horn designs, and what makes this speaker particularly superior to other horn designs, and why I personally think is the best horn speaker I have heard. But before we go over those key features, firstly, this speaker is designed by Joseph Crowe, who has dedicated a lot of time into waveguide designs and horn designs, and you can even download some of the CAD files that he has designed so that you can get them CNC'd and do a DIY project on your own terms as well, and save some money that way as well. But keep in mind that when you do this, people are surprised by how much actually goes into it and how much money and time and knowledge. So keep in mind that it's not just as easy as just receiving the file and then just 3D printing it. So I've been personally following Joseph Crowe's work for some time now because I'm personally into horns. And if you didn't know, that's kind of how I got started in this hobby in the first place, going through JBLs, Altec Lansing, Klipsch, you name it, Klipsch bells, JBL blue faces, voice of the theaters from Altec Lansing. I went through a lot of horn design speakers because I really like the idea of using low-powered tube amplifiers with the inherently high sensitivity of the horns, and also the dynamics and just the overall sound of the horns really attracted me. The idea of horns really attracted me. But of course, there's downsides. They're big, they tend to be big because they have to be. And also the fact that, usually horns add coloration to the sound because any little thing that you do, right? The frequency response, whatever it is, anything in a horn gets amplified by a magnitude, right? So it is a pretty meticulous process in designing a horn properly. And that's really where the distinction is with the Joseph Crowe design, is that the horn itself is designed very, very meticulously and very, very well calculated mathematically and acoustically as well. And you can see that, there's basically no edges to this kind of horn design that you see. It's all around the corners, it's rounded off, and it's very, very smooth. And that smoothness around the edges is going to be the most important part, especially if you plan to download his CAD files and get them CNC'd. You want to make sure that the CNC machine is going to allow for that smoothness, just as Joseph Crowe does it in his designs, in his finished product designs as well. And the reason that this smoothness and the mathematical calculation of the horn becomes important is because it's going to affect the directivity, the dispersion pattern, and the off-axis response of the tweeter. And that's going to become important because the sound that we hear, the bass to treble, is not the same kind of directivity. So when it comes to bass, we have this omnidirectional kind of behavior of dispersion pattern. And then once we get to the higher frequency, it starts to narrow in its directivity and dispersion pattern. And what that essentially means is that unless you have the speakers directly in front of you, facing directly into your ears, you're not going to get the same kind of on-axis response, the same kind of sound that the speaker is meant to play. And you might think, well, that means that I just have to have my speakers told directly towards me then. But that's not really the case either, because that also creates problems, as the sound that we hear in our room is going to be the combination of sound that comes directly from the speakers, as well as the sound that hits off the wall, that the sound radiates to the side of the speakers. So the off-axis response, the side reflection, is going to be as important as the on-axis response, and you want those to be similar, if not the same. And that is kind of the key difference between a bad horn speaker and a really good design, is that a really good design like the Joseph Crowe is going to have a really good directivity and really good off-axis response. So I did some quick measurements to see how good the speaker is and see how close I can get to the response that Joseph Crowe has posted on his website. And as you can see, the response is super, super excellent. If you see the off-axis response, it is really textbook, really. As you can see, the high frequency drops off as I told the speakers to the side, and every few degrees, it just kind of drops a little bit, and that's kind of what you want. You don't want it to like have different frequency deviations or dips and rises that happens when you turn the speaker sideways. You can see that the character of the speakers is intact while I turn the speaker around. And just for the shit and giggles, the lowest one that you see, the lowest response that you see is actually 90 degrees to its side. So this speaker firing to its side is able to still keep perfect, like textbook kind of linear design. And this is kind of what you want to see in a good horn speaker. Now the compression driver used in this horn is the RCF ND350 from Italy. And with the combination of the great off-axis response and the really nice response that this compression driver gives and the lower distortion, I mean, the sound that I hear was super crisp, super natural, and super extended. And when I hear it in my room, I can hear all the little micro details and nuances, and surprisingly, really good imaging for a horn speaker. I often have trouble getting perfect center phantom imaging and side imaging as well, but this was able to create this wide sound stage and really holographic sound that I expect from horn speakers, but even more so, I can hear all the little details, and there was no detail missing. It wouldn't miss a beat. It was just fascinating how I can hear all these little micro details, and it's the high frequency, that tweeter is just so sweet and really well done. Marry that with a really nice tube amplifier, and you have this really magical sound stage and magical fine detail and nuances that you simply don't get from other horn designs, especially from my experience. I really have not heard such a nuanced design. Horn speakers tend to not give all these nuances while having this wonderful body of the sound that we'll talk about in a minute. And using something like the Brunico Terra integrated tube amplifier, as well as the Macintosh MC275 Mark VI, and even my reference Audion monoblocks that I really love. Even though it's a Class D design, it's just so good with this speaker, and it just produces this wonderful sound that I have really not heard in a horn speaker before. It sounds almost without coloration because of how well this horn is designed with that compression driver in mind. So I think it's just absolutely beautiful. And of course, that's going to be the product of that off-axis response like we just talked about. When you set these up in the room, it's going to be a really magical experience and sweet sound. And with low volume, I can get all the details as well, but even at cranking levels, there's not a hint of shrillness or brightness or aggressiveness, which tells me that the distortion is very low and that dispersion pattern is very good. And I really like the look of the horns as well. It's made out of solid walnut, and it's just a fascinating look. And the rest of the construction of the speaker itself is also a solid walnut construction. And of course, you can get the CAD file and then really get it done in any kind of wood you want. But the solid walnut look is just so well done on the speaker. I think it looks gorgeous in my opinion. So aside from the really high quality compression driver, you're gonna also get a really high quality CS 10-inch driver as well for the mid-range and the bass. And so this is a two-way loudspeaker, if I didn't mention that already, and it's going to be a ported design in the back as well. And this speaker, you can see this response that I came up with. I mean, it extends down to 30 Hertz at f3, which is incredible for the size of the speaker. This is not a huge speaker, but it plays like one, and let me tell you, it's mind-boggling how dynamic the speaker is. It truly extends down really low. In my room, in case of my room, it was actually a problem how deep and aggressive this bass was. So dynamic and textured, it was unbelievable. And that mid-range is also going to be affected by that. So the crossover point is 1 kilohertz. So the compression driver actually plays well into the mid-range frequencies. So you're gonna hear a combination of the tweeter unit as well as the woofer unit when it comes to that mid-range frequency, and you get this really textured, really kind of warm but also robust kind of mid-range that you can expect from that kind of horn speaker that you hear in other places. That's warm, inviting sound, but also very full sounding. It's not a lean sounding speaker by any stretch of the imagination, and it's just simply really magical when it comes to that mid-range, from vocals to jazz to rock. I mean, even metal sounds absolutely ridiculously good in that mid-range. And then when it comes to the bass, that's going to be where I said it's gonna be a little bit of a problem when it comes to small rooms like mine, because that bass is going to be really overpowering. So what I personally did was just play around with placement, just placement. And once you get it, it's gonna be super rewarding, and it can be made to work in a small room. But to really make these shine, and I can already tell that my room is a huge limitation with these speakers, put these in a medium to large size rooms and you're just gonna have a really good time. You might not even need a subwoofer, but of course you can help with those nulls, the natural nulls and dips and rises that's happening in your room. Especially if you don't have acoustic treatment, you can help with that by adding subs, multi subs, so more than one sub. And that's kind of what I personally did, and even though I'm in a small room, because I had nulls obviously in my room, so I used 4 subwoofers, 2 of my Arendal 1S and then 1 2S, and then also the new Rel 12-inch subwoofer that I have. So it was an extensive process, but I got this speaker to work really well in my room. And as you can see, it has a lot of bass, but it's really my preference, and it just absolutely smacked. And this is going to be the natural response of the speaker, even though I have the subs. All the subs doing is really augmenting and taking those nulls out of the equation as much as possible. So this speaker is super excellent. I would say that when it comes to bass, it's a sheer monster. So if you're in a small room, it may not be the best fit. And if you want a horn speaker, I would say, talk to Joseph Crowe and see what speaker he has to offer for smaller rooms. And honestly, if it wasn't for just that factor, I would really buy these speakers in a heartbeat. In fact, I would still buy these speakers even in this room if I can keep all the setup I have with the subs always. But as you know, that's not possible since I review multiple speakers and change systems all the time for the review. So it's unfortunate that I can't, but these are just one of the best, the best horn speaker I have heard. It really tops even my JBL L300 that I really loved as even my endgame system way back. And really, this is a speaker that I can proudly say, and with confidence, it is the holy grail of horn loudspeaker designs. While I was listening to this speaker, one of the things that really stood out to me is the effortless sound it produces. It is so effortless in its presentation entirely, from micro to macro details, and the micro and macro dynamics is just absolutely insane on this loudspeaker. And that's going to have to do with the sensitivity of this loudspeaker as well. It's pretty high sensitivity at 90 dB at 1 meter, which again means that you can use low powered amplifiers or low powered tube amplifiers to power the speaker effortlessly without a problem. But also when you talk about the drivability of a loudspeaker, you want to also look at the impedance graph as well. And so here is my impedance graph, and it's going to be a little bit different from the one that is posted on Joseph Crowe's website, since he did some revisions on this one. So going forward, this is going to be the actual impedance graph, and it's not that different. You can see that it's very easy load to drive. You're not gonna have any issues driving this even with an AV receiver. Not that you should really give it really nice power, but it's very easy to drive. Your amplifiers are gonna have no problem driving this whatsoever. Another thing that I really liked about this speaker is the fact that whatever tube amplifier or solid state amplifier that I use with it is able to really kind of synergistically work really well and produce this wonderful sound. It's able to take on the character of the tube amplifier quite well. For example, when I'm using the Brunico Terra integrated amplifier, because it was made for those big RCA speakers, it has this RCA character, and I'll link to my review of that amplifier as well as the coverage I did in Korea of those big RCA speakers. But that character that literally made me cry is taken into effect with the speaker when I pair it up with the Brunico, and it has this wonderful sound that I can't even describe it in words. It's so pure sounding in the mid-range and high frequency. And then with the Macintosh, for example, I get this warm, luscious sound that Macintosh is known for, but with super clarity. It's just absolutely mesmerizing every time I switch to something. Play with the audience, and it's just micro details for days, refinement for days, bass smack for days, chest pounding, just absolutely nuts. And that's going to be also a product of the fact that this speaker basically is free of resonance. It's very low distortion. I mean, I have this graph way up, as you can see, and you see in the waterfall graph here that you don't see any sort of problems here whatsoever. There's no ringing, there's no artifacts, it's super clean, and it's able to play loud levels without any hint of brightness or harshness. And subjectively, even with poor recordings, I played some tracks that, it's just absolutely poorly recorded. And even going back to those recordings, I mean, this speaker is able to produce them really well with full lush sound that is just so musical, luscious, inviting. But again, with all those micro details, it's a really good combination of sound that is just, I can't even say that who this is for, because usually a speaker is going to be like detail oriented or warm, and people like different things, but this is so good in both high frequency, body of the sound, the lushness, and the tonality. Everything is combined so well that I feel like a lot of people would enjoy this, not just one person. In fact, I like a lush sound, but those micro details and nuances, it just blew my mind into how good it's portrayed in the music that I hear. You put good recordings and it's absolutely nuts. You put poor recordings, I mean, it's not as good as the good recordings, but it's still very, very listenable, enjoyable. And with the revision, you're gonna get the isoacoustic Gaia 3 feet thrown in there as well. And that's my go-to isolation feet for my gear, speakers. I have a bunch of them. And it's really nice to see that it's included here. Really, no expenses really spared here. And talking about no expenses spared, you can see the crossover is using high quality Mundorf parts. And I can go on and on about the quality and the things I loved about this loudspeaker. But lastly, I'll say this. So when it comes to the off-axis response being even, some people may look at the bass driver and be like, oh, well, there's edge diffraction there. But as I've noted, the edges are super smooth from the bottom of the horn to the edges, and it's all done intentionally. It's proven in the frequency response, the off-axis response, that there is no edge diffraction on this loudspeaker, or at the very minimum, it's very, very minimal. So what that essentially means is that as I'm walking around in the room, wherever I am, I was in the kitchen, it sounds exactly the same. And it sounds really wonderful wherever you're in the room. And when you sit in the sweet spot, that's going to take an effect. And what I mean by this is the inherent sound of the horn. And you might be thinking, well, Jay, didn't you say that the horn on this is basically colorless? And it is. But the projection of sound, the way the sound is projected into the room, into your eardrums, is going to be different based on the design itself. I can have a similar speaker that measures similarly, because two speakers never measure the same, but let's say I have a speaker that's similarly measured. It's still gonna sound different because a horn is gonna project like a horn, a panel is gonna project like a panel, and a tweeter soft dome is gonna project like a soft dome. You get the point. So even if I have a similar measuring speaker, it's not going to sound similar because of that factor of projection of sound depending on the design itself. And so even though this is a pretty much colorless, as you can get with a horn speaker, I would still say that you need to like a horn projection of sound to like a horn speaker, if that makes sense. So this speaker, I think, yes, definitely people that even don't like horns to begin with is gonna be really impressed with this, but especially those that like the projection of horn is going to be super impressed with this, because it's gonna be better than anything you've experienced with horn speakers. And I don't say that lightly. I've gone through a lot of horn speakers and I appreciate every single one of them, just that without a doubt in my mind, this one is better. Now, with that being said, this speaker does come at a premium price of $15,000 US, but you're paying for the work, the craftsmanship, the design work, and everything combined. And if you don't want that and you are willing to put in some work yourself, like I said, he does provide CAD files, which is very inexpensive for you to get started on. to reproduce something like this. And with that, that concludes my journey with these loudspeakers. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if this video was entertaining and fun, click that like button. It helps my channel out greatly and it doesn't cost you anything. And I hope to see you guys on my next journey as well. So make sure to subscribe and I'll see you guys on my next one. Until next time.